Okay, I am so happy to welcome all of you to the third talk of our New Beginnings Zoom series. My name is Karen Wilkes, and my husband and I own Courthouse Gallery located here in Ellsworth, Maine. This past year has been such a challenge for so many people, and many of us have been hopeful that 2021 would bring a new beginning. Of course, the internet has been flooded with memes jokingly inferring that 2021 is really just 2020's evil twin. Nonetheless, when I saw the work coming out of our artist studios earlier this winter, I was inspired to do a show celebrating a new start. I wanted one, and I'm sure, our artist and many other people did as well. The result is New Beginnings. It's a midwinter virtual show highlighting recent work by 12 of our artists and acts as a precursor to our upcoming summer exhibitions, along with a series of 3 talks. If you missed any of the 2 earlier talks, they are recorded and we will be posting them to YouTube soon. An email notice will come out with how to log on to those. This afternoon, we have 4 guest artists joining us. We have William Irvin, Matt Barter, Ragna Bruno, and Philip Barter. Our first artist speaking tonight is William Irvin. William Irvin was born in the town of Troon on the coast of Scotland. In high school, he and a friend were introduced to modern art after receiving an invitation from the family of the whisk magnate Johnny Walker to view his collection. This was the first time Irvin had seen artworks by the masters in person, and he was hooked. After graduating from the Glasgow School of Art and serving in the Scottish Army, Irvin came of age in London, where he was part of a lively avant-garde scene. In 1968, he moved to Down East Maid and was immediately drawn to the fishing villages of Korea and Jonesport. Here, harbors, islands, and boats, the sea and the sky, inspired bold work fueled by 2 driving forces, abstraction and representation. In 2014, we published 2 books. We published the book, William Irvin, A Painter's Journey by Carl Little. And in 2018, William Irvin at Home, a book that highlights a collection of his small white paintings. A number of poets made contributions to the At Home book. So the painting we're looking at tonight is a new painting by Bill. It's called The Green Sea. It's an oil on canvas and 24 by 30 inches. Bill, you recently celebrated a milestone, your 90th birthday. I want to congratulate you on that. And you have a one-man show coming up at Courthouse Gallery this summer, for which you've been extremely productive. Tell us about your experience this past year in the studio and dealing with, the pandemic and any new directions in your work.
Am I on?
You're on, Bill.
Okay. Well, thank you, Carl. Thank you. Well, the title, first of all, let me say how happy I am to be on this platform with 2 other seniors. I can imagine how many paintings the 3 of us have put together, a mountain of paintings, and all of them beautiful, I'm sure. But I'm just glad to have and Matt, of course, he's the junior, but it's good to be sharing. It's called New Beginnings, this series. But in actual fact, what we're really doing is continuing with our explorations. We cannot really do anything that's brand new. If you're doing something that's brand new, you're not really doing something that is you. We are all confined, I think, to our own mythology. And that's why New Beginnings is actually a continuation. And that's how I feel. I'm continuing. Now, Con mentioned there the pandemic and also the fact that I turned 90. Well, so for me, there was a dual catastrophe. From both the pandemic, turning 90, gave me an extra kick in the ass to get into my studio earlier than usual and stay longer, which is what I do. I get up in the morning, and by maybe 8 o'clock, 8:30, I'm in my studio. And I think I mentioned before, I carry with me a cup of tea. And I start work, and if after an hour, if the tea has been touched, I know that the painting is going well. Uh, Sometimes, well, I should say that I have done so many small paintings as well as my larger work. The small paintings, the pandemic kind of zeroed in on what I was doing there, because the small paintings of houses where I was interested in the private lives that people have in their in their in their environment. And of course, with the pandemic, with the lockdown, this played into my imagination. And I found myself doing the people I had outside doing the wash and things like that. I did a number of paintings, people on the inside, looking out, usually together, two people sharing their lockdown, looking out at the freedom of birds and the beauty of nature. It all went well together, and I did a number of paintings in that vein. Um, I work very, very fast. I work you could say a frenzy, uh, which reflects itself in the condition of my studio. Uh, Paint flies around. Uh, if my dog comes in to watch me paint, as he sometimes does, he usually leaves a different color. So sometimes, so by the end of my time in the studio, I usually take a bath to get rid of the paint. I should actually take it in turpentine, but I use water. Uh, I should mention that. Well, anyhow, just saying that my main thrust is in nature and the sea, trying to get that sense of permanence that nature has, uh, as against our own transitory passage through life. The beauty and the stability and the grandeur of nature is what attracts me. I find that when I work, I am working on a fine line between the representational and the abstract. Uh, I find that if I get too close to total abstraction, it's like coming up against a brick wall that gives off uh, bad vibes. So I back away. I find it's necessary, for me, it is necessary to include something in my work which bring that a viewer will recognize. So it's like a doorway that a viewer can pass through, so that once into the painting, that viewer can experience the full um, spirituality, mythology of the artist once you get into the painting. And so that's why representation to me is like a doorway that pulls them in there. The abstract to the total abstract, I avoided. I used to do that. When I lived in England, I was a totally abstract painter, but I now find for myself the need to moderate that to a certain extent. We all use abstraction to a certain extent too. It's the language of art. It's composition, it's color, it's line, arrangement. And we all have our own dialect, and mine has a little Scottish bark to it. But I think the point is that we can all recognize each other's work. If I find that in all good art, you can recognize the painter from a long distance away. I can look through a window and say, oh, there's a Philip Barter, or there's a Ragna Bruno, and if I saw a construction, I could say that's a Matt Barter. We all have our personality in our work, and it should show itself to the viewer. And so that to me, well, at this time, I'm working very hard. I'm getting a lot of work done, and I'm looking forward to my exhibition at the courthouse this summer. And I think that probably is as much as I want to say at the moment.
Well, Bill, I have a question. This painting, the Green Sea, you've used this motif a lot, the Green Sea. And even though the sailboat isn't there, I feel like the sailboat is there. You know, I mean, the only representational thing in the painting are the two seagulls.
That's
But
Yeah,
right.
but these two seagulls define the space in the painting and give it a lot of poetry, which I think is so interesting.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
Yeah,
I use seagulls a lot. I know that, and I use sailboats a lot. Part of it is for the expression, of course, but
yeah,
I love using seagulls because it draws a line in the canvas, two or
yes,
three. There's a line being drawn, and that line helps balance the painting and adds to the expression of it. So although they're representational, they provide an abstract addition to the painting.
I really like this, Bill, a lot. It's lovely. Now, these two birds, they're very subtle and they're heading in two different directions. Is there anything to this?
I heard that chuckle.
Living here on the bay, the Blue Hill Bay, I find that by 5 o'clock in the evening, all seagulls are flying in one direction. That is towards the islands. You can't see one flying the other way. They go from left to right. But during the day, they're like this. They're wheeling and turning around.
yes. And also it gives the depth to the painting when you have them so separate and in different directions, which is very, very wonderful. And the eye goes to the seagulls immediately and enters the painting through the seagulls, I think.
Yes, and they're great reference points.
Yes.
I see in the seagull, you also know what else is there, what else,
Yeah.
what's the environment seagulls live in, right? They water in the sky and no,
Yes.
yeah, they're great reference points.
Yes.
Well, I find that I'm fascinated with the clouds that I see out of the window here. They are I don't think I've ever painted a cloud that doesn't exist. No matter how I change, nature comes up with it. Sometimes after I've painted it, nature will show it, and I'll say, "Whoa, I painted that 2 days ago."
Yeah.
It's impossible to invent something.
Yes.
Nature, beyond nature. Nature has done it all. That's all.
Yes.
Exactly.
And the clouds are always beautiful. Wherever they are, however they look, they are always perfect.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And not just visually beautiful, but spiritually beautiful. There's
Yes.
a uplift to clouds. There is such a joy. That's how I feel.
Yeah, and they're all different. They're like snowflakes. Each one is different.
You're right.
But you know what, too? Bill's quite a colorist, and when you look at all his work, he has a huge range of palette and mood in his work, and sometimes they often look like color field paintings.
Yeah.
Except for the little representational items here and there that, like he says, brings you in. But the colors are beautiful in here. And this is a little more abstract than normal, Bill, this painting.
Well, I've done a series of very close to abstraction, which will be in the summer show. But color field paintings, well, of course, we all know here on this platform here, the power of color, and color field increases the impact of that particular color. So I like to paint simple. Someone once told me, paint with love and keep it simple. And that's how I feel. Paint with love and keep it simple. And I try to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that comes through. That comes through beautifully in all of your paintings. The structure is always very strong and the color very much alive. I think that very often people say that we put our feelings into the pigment when we paint.
Yeah.
Somehow
Mm.
it's inherent. Our feelings go into the paint. Yes,
Yeah,
that's very interesting.
it is.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it, Ragnar. I think that's
Yeah,
true.
well, it's
That's
a great painting.
Oh,
it is.
thank you.
And that's what makes art different than just pretty pictures, isn't it? That we're in it.
Yes.
Yes, your
I mean,
hand is in
yes.
it. Well, thank you, Bill.
So will it be in the show this summer? Will this painting be in the show this summer?
Yeah, I probably. I mean, the only reason it wouldn't be is if something else pushes it out. You know, the paintings, they take on a life of their own. They start arguing
Yes,
with each other. You know, I mean,
I agree.
only a
They
certain
take a life of their own.
yes.
life of their own. And so this, so far, yes, I'm framing this painting. It should be in the show, but we'll wait and see.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
plan- the
I'm looking
plan is-
forward.
The plan is for all the shows and all the paintings in the New Beginnings show right now will be coming up in a show this summer. But
Yeah.
thank you, Bill. We're gonna move on to our next artist, Matt Barter.
Okay.
Matt Barter is a self-taught artist who paints, carves, sculpts using just about any material he can find. Despite his lack of formal training, Barter has an eye for
Yes.
composition, shapes, and color. Motifs focus on the earthy beauty of Maine's landscape and her working waterfronts. His fishermen are not out lobstering and fishing, but going about their onshore chores, tending to equipment, repairing boats, and scraping and painting everything from hulls and bait shacks to buoys and sheds. His work is bold and fearless. Matt's carved fishermen and wood reliefs are fast becoming a signature motif. Made from reclaimed wood beam and oil paint, his rough cut figures capture the brawn of these weathered men laden with lobster traps, hose, buckets, and buoys. Matt was raised down in Down East Maine, and he worked with his father, the acclaimed artist who's with us tonight, Philip Barter, on various lobster and mussel harvesting boats. Matt learned to paint under the guidance of his father, and he sold his first painting by the age of 10. By his teens, he was learning the mechanics of oil painting and making his own wood reliefs. Matt lives with his wife, Rebecca, and their 2 sons in Brunswick, Maine. The sculpture we're looking at today is called Boat Work. It's made with paint, reclaimed wood, and found objects. It's 24 by 36 by 24 inches. So Matt, you're the youngest on this panel of seasoned artists this evening, and you have a family and a studio at home. So your experience this past year has been very different. How has the pandemic affected your day-to-day life, and has your work taken any new directions over the past year?
Thank you, Karen, for including me in this panel, this brilliant panel, you could say. I appreciate being included. The last year in 2020, when the pandemic started in March, I tried not to allow it to alter what I was doing. I agree with Bill, you have to continue no matter what. I think that's the most important quality of an artist is stubbornness. You can put a show together and not sell a single piece and get a terrible review and give up, or you can just pick up your boots and keep going. And I think that's the most important quality of an artist is just to keep going. And so with the pandemic, I just kept going and kind of dug deeper into stories that I'd already told, but found more detail in those stories that hadn't been explored. And I think that the Boatwork series is more about that. It parallels a lot of my own experience because I don't go out lobstering anymore. I did it for a couple of years. I really enjoyed it, but I don't go anymore. And so the Boatwork series is about the work on the shore, kind of like myself. I'm shore bound, you could say.
We're back.
So diving into this series of Boatwork was about the process and all the work that it takes to get everything in the water so it can fish and the fishermen can keep working. As far as the process changing, I think the most difficult thing was material sourcing. sheltering at home didn't give me the opportunity to go and to the places that I would get materials and items that I would use. So I found myself rummaging through my recycling, rummaging through my backyard for old beams and boards that I'd discarded or rejected and finding ways to use those. And so that's basically the biggest change, I think, was material sourcing. And then taking time to research, that was a big change. Having more time on your hands means that you get an opportunity to look through the old masters, the modern masters, to look for tricks and techniques that maybe you can employ in some of your work. I used to look forward to going to New York City with my family to the museums twice a year, at least. And since we couldn't do that, I found myself on the internet more, looking at paintings and finding artists that I maybe looked at briefly, but then finding more pieces, digging deeper to see more of their body of work, to find things that you can not steal from, but reference and build on. As far as the process, at the easel, I tried employing new techniques. At the easel, I was finding myself pre-mixing colors. So that way, when I went to paint, it was much more loose and free. And that way I could even control my palette more by having those pre-mixed colors. I really love that piece by Bill Irving because it's a very subtle palette, but it's very rich and it's not a very confused palette, which is something that I really appreciate about some of the paintings that he's done. And then the sculpture process was more doing the same thing over and over again so that you work intuitively and you can just allow your hands to just work almost like a factory. And so when you're doing that, you're not confused at what your next phase of the process is. And it allows you to really get your craft down. And I think that's what I was doing with my sculpting.
Actually, Matt, it sounds more like a musician. You want to practice enough so that when you play, it just flows,
Yeah, and artwork is a harmony, it's a harmony of space and time. And you play with that. And, if I had a camera going in my studio, it would look a little bit like a sailor dancing on a boat's deck back and forth, And I think that's kind of how an artist works is.
So for the sculptures, you go like trial and error. You put the things together until you like them. Is that the way you go about your sculpture?
The sculpture is, I do a lot of sketching. And so I'll compose something, just like a painting, you'll compose it.
Yes.
And so at a certain point, though, you get to the point where you can compose it in your mind. And so I don't do a lot of trial and error.
No.
I kind of know exactly what I want to accomplish. The only tricky part is I use a lot of recycled beams, and you might grab a barn beam that's, it's usually a 6x6, and you'll start working in it, and you'll find a big knot in it or a giant steel rail going right through
yes.
that beam.
Yes.
And so then you have to change your whole plan in the moment. And so that can be tricky.
Do you ever pick up stuff on the beach? Looking at this, it's a nice weather. It's a nice weather.
Sorry.
And I was wondering, sometimes I find old lobster buoys on the beach, and they would look great carved up and into figures, but your figures have that sense of the sea about them, like an old lobster buoy. You've got that embedded in your figures there. That's wonderful.
Yes.
How big is it?
Go ahead, Bill.
Yes.
How big is what?
How big is the piece you have here?
It's roughly, I think, 36 by 24 by 36.
36.
Yeah.
It's a big piece.
It's
a big piece.
It would fit on a dining room table. It would take up a good portion of that dining room table.
Yes.
What are those strings going down? Or it looks like strings. Am I reading it that there are strings going down to the figures? Those lines?
No, that's the wall that I photographed it on. Those are that's my wall in my studio. They're barn boards.
I wasn't sure. Like the arms might move.
Oh, there's some moving parts. Every piece has a few moving parts on them, almost like a toy. I love folk art toys. I love Russian folk art toys. And that's one thing that I try to keep a few things. Like if you look in that little pail there, I think it's an old can, a bean can or something. There's usually something in there that you can take out. So if a child happens upon one of these toys, he's going to find something to play with it on the.
That's what I thought when I saw it first, that you have a very good relation to your young years as a child playing, because that's what it looks like to me, that you have still that wonderful inner child that knows how to work this, because that's very important in art.
Thank you, Ragna. And I call my studio the sandbox because it's a play area. You go up there and you play. And you would never tell a kid what to do in a sandbox. If you went up to a kid and said, "What are you doing with that truck? You're playing with that wrong." You'd be seem like a crazy person. But so many times people go into someone's art studio and say, "Well, why don't you do this?" or "Why don't you trying that?" It's just playtime, you know.
Well, you were brought up with your father and with your siblings, and you were doing art since a very young age. And of course, that has a great influence in what you are doing, which is marvelous. I like the painting also that you have behind you, that very big abstract painting there. Is that a block of wood or is it on canvas, what you have behind you?
It's a relief piece. My dad taught me to make relief work when I was younger with plywood built out. But instead of finishing it with boat enamels, so it's very, the colors are pronounced, I use more of plaster lathing, drop cloths, and found object metal. So it has more of a drab color, which I really appreciate, like a Nevelson inspired more or less.
Yes. And you know what Louise Nevelson said when entering the studio, above all, do not think, which I very much love. You can think afterwards, but not before.
That's a good one, Ragna.
It is.
It's a beautiful piece, both what you have behind you and the sculpture. Very impressive.
Thank you very much. That means a lot coming from you, Ragna.
Well, thank you.
So, okay, well, thank you, Matt. We're going to move on so we have some time for audience questions at the end, because I'm sure there are a lot of people are going to want to talk to you for. The next artist we have up tonight is Ragna Bruno. Ragna Bruno was born in Madrid, Spain, and credits her multicultural childhood as the foundation for all her artwork. Her father is German, her mother Swedish, and Bruno is fluent in Spanish, German, English, and French. And during the pandemic, she learned Italian. Bruno's father was a poet and a businessman who came from a long line of artists and architects. Her mother was a sculptor who spoke six languages. Her parents' friends were artists and musicians, and Bruno grew up immersed in the arts at home and at school. Every day after high school, she walked to the Prado Museum and studied the master's artworks. Throughout her early life, Bruno studied dance, music, and art in Madrid, London, and Switzerland, and she traveled extensively in Europe, Central and South America, and India. Bruno owned an antique store in Madrid and was co-founder of Bermusica, an international concert management company based in Madrid that is still operating today. She came to the United States in 1975 to marry Werner Torkanowski, a world-renowned conductor. The couple moved to Hancock, Maine in 1977, and Ragna has pursued her passion for art and committed to being a full-time artist ever since. She still lives in Hancock, and she visits Spain frequently to see family and friends. The piece we are looking at here is quite large. It's 48 by 48 inches. It's an oil on canvas, and it's called Totem. Ragna, other than learning Italian during the pandemic, which I wish many of us were thoughtful enough to do, How
Yes.
has the pandemic affected your life and influenced any of your work this past year?
Well, I would say that in one way, it has not influenced me at all. I mean, I go to the studio every day and I spend there many hours, and I need solitude. I welcome solitude, and I live also alone since many years. So that is a totally normal part of my life. What I didn't realize when I began working is that I was deeply affected by COVID, because my art, all of a sudden, whatever I was working on, was totally different. I used a lot of black and orange. So then I realized, of course, that it had affected me psychologically. And I did a number of paintings in that sense, and was so grateful to you, Karen, when you came to choose, because I was not really very, I didn't know if it would, what I thought about what I was doing. So when you came and chose 9 paintings, it was a great relief to me. You brought them to the gallery, you hung them in a different way as a whole. And then Alex came by and said, well, this is the wall of mourning. And also noticed the number 9 and the 9 muses. So I felt that the beginning of this COVID work was really a collaboration between you, Alex, and myself. And I felt that gave me a tremendous happiness. So there's now I continue in that sense to do, but it has less black. It is more uplifting, I think. And the painting that I have, the 48 by the totem that is on the screen, that painting, I think, is the completion of these series. I think I'm done with a deep feeling about COVID. And I'm doing something slightly different, which I hope I will complete for the show. But speaking about the 9 muses, I always felt that Maine is the land of the muses. Here, when we came in 77, our life changed totally. I dedicated myself totally to painting. And my husband began again playing the violin and composing. So I realized that Maine has a tremendous effect on the life, everyday life, and also many artists were born here, and many have come to retire, and then they started a totally new life. So the influence of Maine, I think, is very important in all artists that live here. And there are so many poets, writers, architects. I mean, it's unbelievable what happens in Maine. There is a richness that I think is wonderful. So I think that if anybody would like to ask me a question, I'm ready.
I was going to ask you the title of that painting.
Yes.
Because it kind of, I don't know what it means. So not that it matters, but I'm kind of curious what the title is.
Totem.
Yes.
Yes. Well, you know, it's kind of a mythological, a big slab of something that has a meaning. And for me, it is like the completion of the series of the paintings that I did.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
And I think it is also the last in that sense that I'm going to do. Yeah.
It's a beautiful.
Because what I'm doing now is slightly different.
Right. It's a beautiful painting, and I love the black at the bottom with the warmth at the top. And of course, at the top, it looks, you have the impression of trees there.
Yes.
But there are paintings of yours which are although apparently abstract, they still give off for me a feeling of warmth. I always feel that there is a sense of nature, of sensibility to the work they are not cold in any way. They're beautiful, warm paintings, even the most abstracted ones you do. This is a lovely one. I love it.
Well, thank you. Of course, I'm very influenced by the light in Maine and by my everyday walks. I love nature and I feel immersed in it, totally immersed in it. The same that I feel totally immersed when I'm in the studio. I forget everything else. There is no time there. There is nothing. It's a totally different world. But Maine, I think, has had a great influence on my work. Although, I mean, there are many painters that I love, like my first love, of course, was my grandfather's painting. And then came Velázquez, who I have to see every year, the paintings of Velázquez, and also Rothko. And I think this series have something of the influence that Rothko has had always on my work.
Yeah.
I love his
that
paintings.
this. It's lovely, Ragna. Very nice.
I love
beautiful
Rothko.
piece.
Thank
So on
you.
this piece, I love the heaviness of the black at the bottom. It has a pulling effect downward, but that white line across there, it just is stunning.
Yeah.
And
So
the color at the top has a very flesh-like color, which I enjoy as well. So it does have a warmth to it. Really nice.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you.
Phil, were you
Yes.
trying to say something? Phil?
Well, I agree with both Bill and Matt, and I think it's just a striking painting in its subtlety and the warmth, the atmosphere, the palette is wonderful, warm and comforting, and the existence of black, that sharp contrast, just really makes it pop.
Yeah.
And it does feel like a nice warm winter day.
Yes, it does.
Yes.
Yeah, it is beautiful, Ragna. I was going to say, you did mention earlier during the pandemic that even though you live alone, that you had a lot more communication from your friends. And
Yes,
family.
I get all the time WhatsApps, emails, messages from all over the world. And I sometimes take many days to answer because it is wonderful, because I've even have friends from when I was 17 years from whom I hadn't heard in a long time that have been in contact with me. And that has been wonderful because, I mean, I love solitude and never feel alone, but during COVID, even less so.
Yeah.
And that has been a wonderful experience for me.
A wonderful gift too.
Yes, a wonderful gift, that's right.
Well, thank you, Ragna. We're going to move on.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our last artist of the evening is Phil Barter. Phil Barter is a self-taught artist from Booth Bay Harbor, Maine. He was living the hippie life in California back in the 1960s when he discovered the artist Marsden Hartley and experienced an aesthetic epiphany. Barter felt an immediate connection to the Lewis-born painter who would serve as a kind of talesman and an artist to inspire, but also to move beyond. By the 1970s, Barter had moved to Down East Maine, where he and his wife raised their 7 children. Challenged to support his growing family as an artist, Barter took a 10-year hiatus from painting, working in all manner of traditional Maine jobs. In his spare time, he studied art history. By the time Barter returned to painting full-time, he was receiving critical acclaim for his work. Bates College Museum of Art mounted a retrospective of Barter's work in 1992, and Bates, the Farnsworth Museum, and the Portland Museum of Art all acquired his work. Barter was also the subject of a feature profile in Down East Magazine in 1995, and Tim Sample highlighted Barter's life in one of his postcards from Maine segments on the CBS Sunday morning program hosted by Charles Kuralt. Barter has since spent a half-century painting the landscape of his home state. We also published a book on his life and career and art about 3 years ago, I think it was, Phil. Anyway,
yeah.
The painting we're looking at tonight is called Mount Bigelow. It's a subject Phil returns to frequently. It's an acrylic on board and it's 30 by 30 inches. Phil, what challenge has the pandemic created for you this past year? And has it affected your work in any way? We'd love to hear about your experience.
Well, I don't know if it was a challenge so much. I enjoy being home. So that didn't bother me very much. I think what's happened to the rest of the world and everything obviously bothers everyone, you know. But personally, I have to say that I guess it's just put me in the studio more. It's I'm not sure how, not negatively anyway. I just keep going.
So what have you been working on this past year in the studio?
Well, I've settled on the Mount Bigelow for the last 2 months. I have a sketch here. I don't know if you can see it or not, but okay. So anyway, like all of my sketches, I try to keep it simple so that I don't get confused, and that helps me focus on the palette. You know, once you get a good composition, then it's all done as far as the composition goes. But then I try to focus on a palette, and I've done probably 6 or 8 of these so far this year. And I think it's time to move on to another sketch, but I've had a lot of fun with it.
So Phil, why do you go back to Mount Bigelow so much? What is it about the mountain that draws you in?
Well, as living on the ocean, I like to go inland to see the mountains 2 or 3 times a year to make sure they're still there, and. And I like to go in different seasons. I haven't been to the north this winter yet. I want to go before the snow goes. I like to go up there. We haven't had any snow here, so I want to see some snow. And but I go back every season. I go into the mountains or into the woods and lakes in Maine, and
So on this one,
So
Dan,
have you done this same Mount Bigelow in different seasons?
oh yes, I have it.
You have, yeah.
Probably over 25, 30 years, I've painted that mountain and that range of mountains probably 25 or 30 times anyway.
That's amazing. And what I find so wonderful is the vibrancy of the color, which is unbelievable, because it is not very thickly painted, is it? Or is it thickly painted?
No, it's not that thickly painted.
Yeah, it's translucent and beautiful, very vibrant color.
Well, thank you. I get that first of all, I have a base of color, and then I use glazes and overpaint 2 or 3 times. With acrylic, to get the intensity of oil, you have to go back 3 or 4 times.
I see. Yeah.
To acrylic about 25 years ago when I got throat cancer, and I figured the chemicals were probably contributing somewhat to it. But
well, I understand that you're saying that there really is a Mount Bigelow, but I get the impression that those are internal landscapes. You know, that you are creating the landscape. which
Yeah,
Naldo, you are creating landscape. The Mount Bigelow is just the visiting there is just keeping you honest. But
exactly. You're right. You see that little mountain, you see that little mountain in the background? That's
Yes.
called
Yes.
that's called Potato Nubble. And you only see that from the south. This painting was painting from the west looking east. And you can't really see that little peaked mountain there as well from that view. So, but I put it in anyway. 'Cause
So
Few
tell
things on
us
this one,
more
Debbie.
about the technique that you employ to make the colors so vibrant. I'm very interested to know how you do that. It's beautiful.
So, Philip, you were talking about you use glaziers on your work at times. I was wondering, I sometimes use wax mixed in my painting. I
Yes.
wonder, other people, Ragna, do you use anything other than oil paint? Do you mix?
Yes, I use wax very often, and then I try out different things. And unfortunately, afterwards, I can never replicate it because I don't know what I did. Sometimes I have pieces that I say, oh, this I would like to do again. And I don't remember what I did. Because when
great.
I paint
What?
like you, like the paint flies around, everything splashes, and I have no idea what I'm doing. And
Yeah.
then I can never do it again.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, then you have to do something original every time. You
I
have-
think I have to think more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I think,
Dad,
I
can I
think
get
they
a,
call
can I get a word in here, Dad? Hey,
don't they call that a happy accident?
I like this
Yeah.
one.
I love happy accidents. Happy accidents make a painting
Yeah.
much better. Yes,
Yes.
big painting, boring painting.
yes.
So Dad, on this one, it looks like you've got the masonite flipped around backwards. I see that texture on there.
Well, that's right. I turned the masonite, but you know,
I like it.
I like the texture. It's more like canvas when you turn it with the rough side, but you have to sand it more because those grooves are deep. So I have to
Yes.
sand times between settings.
So on the mountain line, I see a red line. Did you start out with a red line when you were doing your layout on this one?
Yeah. Well, yes. Usually I start with a Indian red or red oxide.
I love it. What it does is it, instead of a black line, it makes those colors just more
More
it brings the
vibrant.
blue out.
Yes,
Yes.
it's beautiful. It's very beautiful.
Well, thank you
Blue
very
and
much.
red are
you.
great.
Well, I like, Phil, how you did the sky, which, you know, it's not blue or brilliant or anything like that, but
Right.
it kind of gives the rest of the colors a chance to shine. The sky and the cloud are very muted.
Mm. Well, I think you'll find in that sky there's a little bit of every color there in the sky.
Yes,
I
yes.
love that dark cloud that's just coming into the painting.
Yes.
In. And at any moment, it's going to cover the sky.
Yeah, you can't just have a boring sky, right? You have to have a cloud or a seagull or something.
You have to do something. Yes. You have to create some drama with the dark.
That's right.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
And that's what has happened. Very beautiful.
Thank you very
Well,
much.
I'm looking forward to seeing it in reality this summer in the show.
Well, and yours as well. So that would be fun.
Thank
It'll be fun.
you. Yes.
I want to say we were fortunate to have three acclaimed artists with us tonight in our senior artist, looking so healthy during this pandemic and so active and so creative. And I always remember what Ragna told me one time: when you're painting, when you're an artist and you're painting, and when you're in that zone, when the work just flows, that time doesn't count against you. And that's why they're so young.
And keeps you younger. That I think that is true. I
And you're
think
in that
that when I
creative
look at
zone.
the,
Yes.
yes, and that takes years of you. And also, I think the response to art that you do always gives for happiness. I mean, we struggle a lot, but we also have something rewarding when we have finished, even more than musicians, because the painting stays there, although they may be sold or whatever.
Yes.
But I think it is, we are lucky to be artists. I'm grateful to have that time and to be able to do it. I'm extremely grateful.
Exactly.
It's about 5:05, so why don't we open this up to audience questions? I see we have a hand raised by Kate Beaver. Kate, you can go ahead with your question. You can direct it to any of the artists if you like.
Oh, thank you. It's actually for anyone. I wondered if you tend to paint in silence or if you tend to paint while listening to music, because I am a musician.
I always listen to music, but it has to be music where I know every note. I usually listen to Bach and Schubert. And if I know about everything, then I can listen to it. Otherwise, if it is an unknown piece, I cannot paint to it. Then I have to listen. But I think that it is very important to listen to music.
Yes, I
For
do
me.
too.
Karen, I have a question.
And Kate, I think you have one of my paintings.
I do, and it's inspired me to record a new album. So I'm so appreciative to be able to gaze at it every morning.
Well, and I'm appreciated that you bought one. Thank you.
Karen, could I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, Marge.
It's interesting to me that 3 of the artists on this panel, and Matt, this may be very true of you as well, seem to flirt with abstraction. Sometimes you go ahead and marry it, but it always seems to me like a kind of push-pull, moving towards the abstract, moving away from it, going back to it. And I'm curious about what the attraction of abstraction is.
I think the attraction for me with abstraction is
Whom are you asking?
freedom of expression. Just ultimate freedom, that's abstraction for me.
Yeah, and also it is very much like music. When you do totally abstract work, it's an evolution of you have done before, but it is more like music and more universal. And when you are in that mood, then it can happen. That's my feeling.
Yes, and my feeling.
What about?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, abstraction is really the power of the language of art.
Yeah.
And just that, you know, and that's why it moves to, you know, the oldest painters, the Renaissance painters before, they used abstraction to,
yes, of course.
They put together their paintings constructively to be expressive. So if you wanted to find, like you could take Botticelli's Primavera, the flow and movement in that painting is beautiful. It's the abstract language they were using just as we do now.
Yes,
I like the quote
and
from,
even painters of the 18th century, like Goya. When you look at the painting of Goya, and then you go near and you look at the dress, it is a total abstraction. And with Velázquez, it is the same. So in every painting, there is always abstraction too.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes.
Phil, did you have a question?
And I find that amazing.
Phil, did you have a response there?
Well, no, I just had a comment about the abstraction in general. Is that my favorite quote is when Kokoschka, who was painting in his backyard, and his mother-in-law walked by and she said, "What are you painting?" He said, I'm painting a landscape. And she said, "Well, where are the trees?" And he says, "I'm painting between the trees."
We have
Very
a,
good.
On that same line, you can improve nature, and you can't really imitate it or attempt to imitate it. So why not just have fun with it?
Yes. Yes.
I hope that answered your question, Marge. We have another question from Carol. Carol, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, I'm sorry that you do not have me on video because I've got two of Philip's beautiful paintings right
Oh,
behind me.
you can go on video now if you like.
I hope that you can see them. Not that there. Well, let's see. Here they are. It's hard to see them, but one of them I bought. The one on top I bought probably in 1993
Mhm.
from Holly Hill in Maine, and it was part of a dresser. And the dresser died, but I kept the frieze on top of it. And I wanted to know whether you paint on furniture anymore because it was beautiful, and what I have left is still beautiful.
Well, thank you very much. I haven't painted only for myself. I painted furniture lately, but there was a while there when that's how Matt learned to paint, was helping me to paint furniture, and we would have fun with the furniture, like adding paintings to it or painting the panels, using the frame of a panel to paint a landscape or something in it, and that was a lot of fun. Yeah.
I remember the moment you told me to grab a brush because the paints were drying too fast for you.
That's right. I said, Matt,
Grab that brush
now
and start
the
moving
paint's
the paint.
drying.
And I started doing this and that. I didn't know what I was doing.
He must have been
very
about
much.
Do we have any more questions out there? This is your opportunity to ask any of the artists a question before we call it an
Yes,
evening.
Karen, this is Barbara Sieber.
Hi, Barbara.
I wanted to direct this to Ragna. Ragna, I have 5 of your paintings. And I first got started because I had visited the gallery there and loved the first one, and then I just kept adding. So I much appreciate your
that is amazing. I'm very grateful.
Your subtle colors are so beautiful. I love your colors. But I wanted to ask you, the latest one I have is called Night Song. In particular did you have in mind with Night Song?
Well, I will tell you, my way of working is that I don't know at all what I'm going to do. I never do a drawing or any preparation. I go to the studio without any premeditated idea. So it's just when I look at the colors that I use some colors or others, and I work on it until I think it is done. But, and the title comes way afterwards. Mm-hmm. So when I'm painting it, I have no idea, to tell you the truth, I have no idea what I'm doing until I finish.
Well, it comes out very well.
That is my way of painting.
Well, do you, one of the sort of games I play with your paintings is that I always see figures in them. I always make my own story about your paintings because I see little figures here or,
yes.
You know, at any rate.
Oh, I love that.
With Night Song, I see frogs.
I love that.
I see frogs and birds and animals at night.
Well, I'm delighted because that's what I like. I like the people who look at it to see whatever they want in them.
Yes, it's wonderful.
That makes me very happy. And I'm very grateful that you have so many of my paintings. Thank you.
Well, I'm still looking. I'll probably buy more. So thank you. I love your work.
Thank you, Barbara.
Yes.
Are there
Thank
any
you.
other questions?
Thank you very much.
Yes, I have a question. My name is Ed Bowditch, and I want to brag about the 6 Barters that I have. My parents, Nat and Peggy Bowditch, bought a whole bunch in the 1970s. I don't know if Phil can see this one.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
That's amazing.
Next to it. but
Wow.
they're old Barters from the 1970s. My
Oh, yeah,
wife
these
and
are
I,
very early, yeah.
they're very early and they're our pride and joy out here in Colorado.
Well, thank you very much.
And my parents owe us 2 more
Great.
someday. Thank you.
Hey, Ed, I'm glad you could join us all the way from
Great.
Colorado. So
Are you really,
wonderful.
are you related to Nat Bowditch?
That's my father.
That's what I thought. All right. Good to
Yeah.
see you.
Good to see you.
Do we have any other questions from anybody? I see we have a question from Liz. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Liz.
This is John, not Liz.
Oh,
But,
okay, says Liz.
I have two questions. One, where does that gentleman in Colorado live? Because we live in Boulder and have a wonderful Barter painting that has been passed down from a couple of generations. And we're very, very happy, and we love to get back to Maine every summer to go to the various studios. So I'd love to know where this other gentleman lives with the 5 or 6 Barters. But my real question is, how has the pandemic affected the sale of each of the different artists' paintings? Has it been really tough, or have you been able to adapt to selling your paintings via Zoom or via the internet?
Well, I would say, what did you say your name was again? Because I keep seeing.
My name is John Heinbach.
John, as the gallerist, I will say that surprisingly, we had a very good summer, and that people found that they couldn't go on vacation, they couldn't eat out, and that spending more time in their home, they wanted to surround themselves with more beauty. And many people who are still working from home were not affected, financially in a negative way. And
Right.
I think they found that buying art just added a whole inspiring dimension to their lives. And what was surprising for us, we found a lot of the younger people were buying art in their 40s and 50s. And I think it's because they haven't been investing in homes. And if anybody who follows Maine knows, home sales were through the roof in Maine. So people that follow art are usually summer people, and they came early. They came in March, and some of them are still here a year later. They didn't go back to California or Colorado or wherever. They just stayed on. So in a surprising way, it has been very good for the art market, and our artists have done very well. And we're grateful for that. Really thankful. And I heard the same thing in China when the pandemic when they got hold of the pandemic in China and people were able to get out, they all went for luxury items. And it doesn't matter if it's a fancy coffee at Starbucks or a piece of art, everybody feels like they deserve something special. And there's nothing more special for your home than an original piece of art by one of these, talented
I
artists.
think there's also some altruism to art collecting, where the people who collect art see the value in investing in artists and their lives so that they can continue to work.
Yes, I agree with you, Matt.
Yeah. Well, I had kind of a slow
But you
summer,
have been also very creative.
but this
Excuse me.
fall and
You've been
winter-
very creative in what you have done the whole time of the pandemic, Karen.
Oh, well, thank you.
I
have
admired
worked
that
hard
very
at it.
much.
Yes, we have worked hard to keep
Yeah.
keep going and not, I really don't believe in folding up your tent. When things get tough, even back in 2008 and 2009, when we opened in 2006 in the middle of the summer, by 2008, the economy had tanked. But we just did bigger shows and more shows. And in the long run, it paid off.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Yes.
did you want to say something, Phil?
Well, I was just going to say that I had a slow summer, but this fall and this winter I've been doing very well. So you only have one best month. So,
I would really like to thank Bill Irvin and Matt Barter and Ragna Bruno and Phil Barter for joining us this evening and participating in this show.
That's right.
But
Awesome.
if there's no more questions, I guess we will, you know, bring this wonderful thing. For some reason, I fell on the ice today and I sprained my wrist, and it's
Oh,
very,
no.
it's very painful. And it's starting to bother me. So it's hard to concentrate on what we're doing here at the very end. But I just want to say good night to everybody and thank the artists for coming to this Zoom talk. It's been a wonderful series. It's been the most fun I've had really at one of our talks. And I'm so
You
glad.
did a lovely
that,
job, Karen.
thank you.
Yeah,
well, I'm
thank
so
you.
glad
Thank
people.
you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Karen.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I hope
Thank
your
you,
wrist
Paul.
feels better.
Thank you
Yeah,
very
well,
much.
thank you. Well, you have all have a
Thank you.
good evening, and you know, I'm really glad that people from all over, like Colorado and places like that, could join us. So the beauty of technology. So I
Great.
hope you all
At
have a
least-
wonderful weekend, and we'll see you soon this summer at all the shows.